Hello, this is Kathleen from the World Economic Federation. In our last video, we covered the philosophy behind the Federation political refugee system and how it would not only apply in times of war, but also in times of state-sponsored persecution, harassment, and in some cases what we would consider legalized terrorism. There will be a future video on the Federation communication services that goes into greater detail, as it is part of the goals of Federation infrastructure to offer fast, secure, affordable, and modern communication services, which would be integrated into the social media system. This service would also include a stipend to guarantee access to state identification, so that a lack of identification cannot be used to keep people from exercising their constitutional rights by participating in free and fair elections, which of course will also be another future video in and of itself. Fossil fuel economics are built around the old ways of the oligarchy imposing its will on the 99% through various systems of control and division, including racism and bigotry. The 1% then stacks organizations with like-minded sycophants from the 99% to control the rest through threat of force. Democracy cannot thrive when the economics are built on the threat of state or state-sponsored violence on an allegedly free citizenry. Our Constitution, in the elimination of slavery, specifically made an exception in the form of forced labor of inmates. Following this, our prison system has been routinely filled with convicts from the areas of society most strongly affected by poverty and racism to be packed into for-profit prisons where recidivism works to maximize profits. How can we claim to be a free nation when people are imprisoned for profit and then treated in a way to try to guarantee their return? The very idea of profiting from the alienation of a citizen from their God-given freedom should be anathema to anyone who values the best ideals of the Constitution and our founding principles to strive for a better world. And when we refuse to see the flaws of the world we were given, out of idolatry and self-interest, we deliver that broken world to our children, though it is our responsibility to deliver our children from that brokenness. We stand now at the brink of leaving to the younger generations a worse world than we were given, for the first time in history. While our leaders say we should take personal responsibility for that, the Federation points out that if the government does not acknowledge any responsibility for its choices, sending our children to war, burdening them with student debt to control their economic mobility, and promulgating an economy that serves their corporate masters and not the nation, then those leaders are declaring that they have no meaningful, positive purpose in society. In the face of fascism, one must always be vigilant, and that is why the Federation Humanitarian Services have a broad mandate in support of people's safety, prosperity, and freedom. A state that seeks to punish its citizens for the failure of its leaders through state violence, or to alienate its citizens from freedom for profit, has no meaningful claim to being a free state. In its vigilance, the Federation will help people through the humanitarian services to move from states or communities seeking to do harm to them or their children. Not only would the FHS provide services for large-scale events, but it would also be available as a day-to-day service. Through your subsidized communication service, you would be able to request the dispatch of emergency services such as mental health and legal services. This could be anything from a mental health issue to a medical issue to a rights issue. If you need professional legal services on site in a traffic stop, for example, hit your comms device and it will notify the Federation to dispatch legal services to be a representative and court-registered witness to the professionalism, or lack thereof, of any concerning law enforcement officer you encounter. If you get a good cop and they need social services assistance in a mental health problem, it is there. If basic medical services are needed, That is part of the dispatch unit. Additionally, if a person feels they are in a threatening situation and will need witnesses, Federation members would be able to set off their communicator's emergency distress beacon, which can also notify local Federation members that someone is in distress, and they can view and record any events on their own device, remotely or on location if they choose. John's half-brother spent a period of time as a public defender, so he has heard many tales of the disparity between the resources of the prosecutors and the resources of the defenders. By having emergency legal services that can arrive on site and subsidized legal services in general to help the understaffed defenders' offices, we hope to stop the influx of inmates for profit. Eventually, we envision an independent, not-for-profit prison system that works to invest in a future for its inmates beyond recidivism for profit. If you find the ideology of the Federation repellent because we are what some call woke, please, by all means, boycott us. That is not cancel culture. That is simply the free market allowing you to choose. I, however, do not see that as woke, but rather what the Bible describes as staying awake. For those of you who are not Christian or followers of an Abrahamic religion, I can describe the Federation as an act of faith in humanity's potential to care for each other and the world, rather than for profit and excess. When I read the story of the good and faithful servant in the Christian scriptures, I have never once thought that when Christ returned, he would be pleased by the profits made for corporate shareholders. Here's the story. Judge for yourself. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, "My master is staying away a long time," and he then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he is not aware of. Matthew chapter 24, verses 45 through 50. It is surprising how often it is the people who believe that Jesus Christ will literally return to earth to judge are the ones who are not feeding their fellows. I didn't include what will happen to the wicked servant in charge when the master comes back, but there is no reward for mistreating your fellows. Yet the only time that I have endured persecution from my faith is by Christians, when I am trying to do what Christ told his followers to do: feed the hungry, tend the sick, visit the prisoner, welcome the stranger, and care for the poor. For a specific example, in the Episcopal Diocese of Oregon, the city of Brookings created an ordinance preventing St. Timothy's Episcopal Church from giving out free meals more than 2 days a week, when they had been giving them out 6 days a week in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis, because neighbors complained about the hungry and homeless people being drawn there. Christians, like those neighbors who reject the hungry and the poor, seek to take my faith from me and from other religions in declaring this nation one nation under their idolatry. While they say that they walk in the path of Christ, they seek to abuse children through the law, persecute other faiths and lifestyles, celebrate poverty as God's punishment, and idolize the wealthy as God's chosen, all while calling my belief in hope, faith, and charity woke. If you use the term by those standards, we are woke AF, make no mistake. For another non-religious example, let's look at Star Trek. Whenever someone complains that Star Trek has become too woke because it depicts gay marriage, gender fluidity, and economic justice, John says, there are only 2 kinds of Star Trek, good Star Trek and bad Star Trek, but it is all woke. Anyone who says otherwise is not paying attention. After all, early Star Trek broke racial barriers, putting a black woman on the bridge of the Enterprise and showing the first interracial kiss on TV. The same goes for this Federation. There is the potential for a Federation that fails to happen, and potential for a Federation that makes a difference, but either way, it is woke. If you seek to persecute, marginalize, and other people, please don't like and subscribe. If you think that people should be treated with decency, compassion, and respect to the betterment of humanity, please, by all means, like, comment, and subscribe. We welcome all faiths and belief systems, including atheism, that seek the betterment of humanity and the world through a more just and equitable society. Together, let's make capitalism pay, protect, and preserve a better world for our children.